Have you ever seen an animal defy everything you think is possible? Picture this. You're in the middle of the ocean where the horizon swallows the world, and suddenly, a lion. That's right, a lion. Swimming, battling massive waves with eyes screaming for help. That's exactly what happened to Jamal, a fisherman from Tanzania, on a day that changed his life forever. Can you believe it? The roar of that savannah king, lost at sea, felt like a call from the universe itself. Save him. And what came next? Brace your heart, because this story will take you from shock to a lump in your throat. It was an ordinary morning with the salty tang of the sea and the sound of gulls slicing through the sky. Jamal, with his weathered fishing net, was sailing 200 kilometers off the Tanzanian coast. He knew those waters like the back of his hand, but nothing prepared him for what he saw. A golden shape fighting the current, with massive paws thrashing the water. A lion in the ocean. Impossible, he thought. But those eyes, exhausted yet full of life, were begging for help. Who hasn't felt their heart race when faced with something unexplainable? Jamal froze, but something inside him shouted louder. He had to act. This story isn't just about a rescue. It's about compassion, hope, and the strength born when humans and animals cross paths. How did a lion end up so far from the savannah? Why was he fighting so hard to survive? And what does this teach us about ourselves? Pause for a moment and imagine, would you have the courage to face the unknown for a living creature? Stick with us, because what comes next will move you, and maybe even change how you see the world. But how could a simple fisherman like Jamal save a king of the jungle lost at sea? The sun had barely risen when Jamal tossed his nets onto the boat, feeling the gentle sway of the waves against the worn wood. The air carried that salty taste that clung to the skin, and the hum of the engine echoed like a familiar tune. He was sailing 200 kilometers off the Tanzanian coast, where land was just a memory. Suddenly, a strange noise cut through the silence. A heavy splash, unlike the leap of a fish. Jamal frowned. "What the heck is that?" he muttered, leaning over the boat's edge. And then he saw it. A lion, swimming, in the middle of the ocean. Can you believe it? The animal's eyes glowed like embers, but they quivered with exhaustion. Its paws, as big as oars, churned the water desperately. Jamal's breath caught. Lions are kings of the savannah, not deep-sea swimmers. Lions can swim, but only short distances, like rivers or lakes, swimming 200 kilometers. That was a miracle of nature. Jamal rubbed his eyes, thinking it was a mirage, but the lion's faint roar confirmed it. This was real, and it was in trouble. Jamal's chest tightened. He'd seen dolphins caught in nets, injured turtles, but a lion. It was as if the universe had tossed a puzzle right in front of him. Who hasn't felt that urge to help, even without knowing how? He thought of his kids, his wife waiting at home, and the risk of approaching a predator. But the lion's gaze, almost human, seemed to say, "Don't leave me here." Jamal grabbed the radio, hands shaking. "Mayday, mayday, there's a lion in the sea!" he shouted. On the other end, silence. Then, a stunned voice. "A what?" "When you find an animal in danger, stay calm and contact local authorities, like Jamal did. Acting fast can save lives." He couldn't pull the lion onto his boat. The beast was massive, and the risk even bigger. But he stayed there, circling, tossing bits of fish to keep the lion afloat. And you? Have you ever faced a moment where you had to trust your gut to help someone? Close your eyes for a second. Imagine the faint roar of that lion, lost in the vast ocean. Can you feel the weight of that scene? But what Jamal didn't know was that his radio call was about to spark a chain of compassion no one could have imagined. The radio crackled on Jamal's boat, blending with the sound of waves, slapping the hull. The air was heavy, laced with the smell of salt and something else. Maybe the weight of responsibility on Jamal's shoulders. "A lion, I swear. It's swimming, but it won't last long," he shouted, his voice hoarse with desperation. At the Tanzanian Coast Guard base, the operator blinked, stunned. A lion in the ocean? It sounded like a fisherman's tale, but the urgency in Jamal's voice was undeniable. Have you ever felt that pit in your stomach when you know something has to be done, and fast? Lions are social animals, and their roars can be heard up to 8 kilometers away on land. But at sea, that weak roar was a lonely cry only Jamal heard. He didn't give up. He described every detail. The wet fur gleaming in the sun, the wide eyes, the body shivering in the cold water. "Please come quick," he begged. And then something magical happened. Jamal's compassion lit a spark. The operator, Aisha, relayed the message, and within minutes, the entire base was buzzing. "A lion? In the sea? Let's go," said Captain Ismail, already sprinting to the dock. Aisha, tears in her eyes, coordinated everything over the radio. She thought of the kitten she'd rescued years ago, lost in the rain. Who hasn't looked at an animal and seen a piece of their own soul? Jamal's raw emotional call rallied an entire team. Boats were prepped, and Amara Anguzi, a wildlife veterinarian, was summoned urgently. "If it's been swimming that long, it might have hypothermia," she warned, slipping on a life vest. Jamal's compassion had become a current, pulling strangers into a mission that seemed impossible. In emergencies, a clear and direct call can save lives, human or animal. Give precise details like Jamal did to ensure a quick response. And if you love stories like this, ones that show the power of acting on instinct, give this a like and subscribe so you don't miss any. Take a deep breath for a moment. Can you imagine Jamal's trembling voice on the radio as the lion fought the sea? But what would the Coast Guard find when they got there? Would the lion still be alive? The sea was rough, with waves making the Tanzanian Coast Guard boat dance like a nutshell. The smell of diesel mixed with the biting wind that seemed to nip at the skin of Captain Ismail and veterinarian Amara Anguzi. They sped toward Jamal's coordinates, hearts pounding. "There!" shouted a crewman, pointing to a golden shape. In the water, the lion, exhausted, barely kept its head above the waves. Can you imagine the tension? A majestic predator, now at the mercy of the ocean. Lions can weigh up to 250 kilos, but in water, even a giant like that seems small against the sea's power. This lion, later named Simba, was on the brink of collapse. Ismaila maneuvered the boat, carefully while Amara readied a reinforced net. "It's got hypothermia. We need to move fast," she shouted, eyes locked on the animal. The operation was risky. A panicked lion could attack, and the sea didn't forgive mistakes. Who hasn't felt that chill down their spine facing something bigger than themselves? Amara, with the calm of someone who's handled wounded elephants, and jittery rhinos, guided the team. "Slow, don't scare it," she said as the boat rocked. Jamal, still in his small boat, watched from afar, praying silently. It felt like a sign from the universe. Such different humans, united by a lost lion. They cast the net, and with a muscle-aching effort, hauled Simba aboard. He collapsed on the deck, panting, his soaked fur gleaming like wet gold. "He's alive!" Amara exclaimed, relieved, but the fight was far from over. In risky situations, stay calm and trust the team, like Amara and Ismail did. Dividing tasks and keeping communication clear can make all the difference. Pause for a second and picture it. A lion, king of the savannah, now shivering on a boat's deck, surrounded by humans who risked everything for him. Can you feel the weight of that? But Simba was so weak. Could Amara save him there, in the middle of the sea? The Coast Guard boat rocked violently, with waves crashing against the hull like muffled thunder. The air was thick with the smell of seawater and something sharper. The scent of an exhausted, drenched animal fighting for life. Amara Anguzi, the veterinarian, crouched beside the lion, who took up half the deck. His eyes, once fierce, were half closed, and his chest rose and fell in shallow breaths. "He's got hypothermia," she said, voice steady but heart racing. "Have you ever seen someone fight so hard to keep going? Lions can lose up to 10% of their body weight in a day without water, and the sea's salt makes dehydration even worse." The lion, later named Simba, was parched, his tongue dry and fur plastered to his skin like a broken shield. Amara worked fast, improvising with what she had. A bag of saline hung from a boat hook, a needle shaking in her hands as the sea tossed them side to side. "Stay with me, big guy," she whispered, as if the lion could understand. And who knows? Maybe he did. Captain Ismail kept the boat on course but glanced back, amazed. He'd rescued fishermen and even stranded whales, but a lion? This was new. Amara injected fluids and covered the animal with thermal blankets, while the crew held flashlights to light her work. Simba's faint roar, almost a whimper, broke their hearts. Who hasn't felt that urgency to help, even when time's against? You? The veterinarian knew every minute counted. Hypothermia could stop the lion's heart any second. In animal emergencies, staying calm and improvising with what's available, like Amara did, can make all the difference. If you don't know what to do, call for expert help. Pause for a second and imagine the rocking boat, the shivering lion, and Amara racing against the clock. Can you feel the tension? But would Simba hold on until they reached land? The helicopter sliced through the Tanzanian sky, its blades thrumming like a drum in Amara's chest. The setting sun painted the horizon orange, but the air in the cabin felt heavy and cold, mixed with the metallic tang of medical equipment. Simba, the rescued lion, lay on an improvised stretcher, wrapped in thermal blankets. His eyes, now dull, barely moved, and each breath seemed a massive effort. "Hang on, big guy," Amara murmured, steadying the saline bag swaying with the wind. Have you ever felt time slipping through your fingers when everything hinges on getting there in time? Lions have a heart that beats up to 60 times a minute at rest, but in critical condition, like Simba's, it can slow dangerously. Amara monitored every vital sign, stethoscope pressed to the lion's chest. On the boat, she'd stabilized him. Enough for this trip, but the veterinary center, 200 away, was his only real shot at survival. The pilot, Juma, flew low to avoid turbulence, but the sea below reminded them how far Simba was from home. Who'd have thought a savannah king would need wings to be saved? The team in the helicopter worked in silence, but the tension was thick. Amara thought of her young daughter, who loved animal stories. "This lion's fighting for you too," she thought, as if Simba carried a piece of them all. Jamal, left behind on the boat, watched the helicopter vanish into the sky, a lump in his throat. It felt like one of those moments when the universe aligns. A fisherman, a veterinarian, a pilot, all for a lion. Who hasn't felt an animal can bring together people who'd never crossed paths? In emergencies, plan logistics ahead, like the team did by calling the helicopter. Knowing where to take an injured animal can save lives. Close your eyes for a moment. Imagine the helicopter's roar, Simba struggling to breathe, and Amara holding on to hope. Can you feel the weight of that? But what would the veterinarians find when they examined Simba? Would he survive the night? The Tanzanian Veterinary Center was lit by white lights, with the hum of generators cutting through the night. The air carried the sharp smell of antiseptic, mixed with the damp heat rising from the ground. Simba, the rescued lion, was rushed to the emergency room with Amara running alongside the stretcher. His eyes, now more alert, still quivered with weakness. Suddenly, a monitor beeped. Simba's heart stopped. "Defibrillator now!" Amara shouted, her chest tight. Have you ever felt the world freeze when someone you're trying to save is slipping away? Lions have a circulatory system so strong that, even in cardiac arrest, they can be revived if treated in time. But every second counts. The team worked like an orchestra, hands precise, voices tense. Amara delivered the shock, and Simba's body jolted on the mat. "Come back, big guy," she pleaded. After 2 minutes of piercing silence, a faint beep sounded. He was back, but the fight wasn't over. As they examined the lion, the veterinarians noticed rope marks on his neck, old scars telling a cruel story. Simba had been a victim of animal trafficking. The scars changed everything. Amara felt a mix of anger and sorrow. Who hasn't looked at an animal and wanted to erase its pain? The team doubled their efforts, giving antibiotics, fluids, and oxygen. Simba, though weak, seemed to fight with a strength from somewhere deep. It was as if he knew these humans were his last chance. Hours passed, with his heart stopping twice more. Each revival was a miracle, each breath a victory. Support organizations fighting animal trafficking, like donating or sharing information. Small actions can protect lives like Simba's. Pause for a moment and feel it. The beep of the monitor, the smell of antiseptic, and Sim 689 dBA fighting for life. Can you imagine the strength of that? But how would Simba recover? And what would his story do to the world? Dawn in Tanzania brought a golden sky, with the song of wild birds echoing in the distance. At the veterinary center, the air still held the faint scent of wet earth from the night's rain. Simba, now stronger, rested in an adapted enclosure, his eyes gleaming like renewed embers. Amara watched him, feeling warmth in her chest. He wasn't just a lion anymore, he was a symbol. His story, from the ocean to here, had spread across the world. Have you ever seen an animal become a bridge between such different hearts? Lions, when recovering from trauma, can roar with full strength again in weeks, a sign of resilience that inspires even humans. Simba, with his rope scars revealing a past of animal trafficking, became a banner against that cruelty. His story hit social media, with videos of Jamal, tears in his eyes, recounting how he saw the lion battling the waves. NGOs in Tanzania launched campaigns, raising funds to protect wildlife. Simba, without knowing it, changed laws and hearts. Amara, tending to him, thought of her daughter, who dreamed of being a veterinarian. "You're proof we can overcome anything," she told Simba, who answered with a low, almost affectionate rumble. Who hasn't looked at an animal and felt it understands your soul? Jamal's compassion, the Coast Guard's courage, the medical team's effort, it all became a movement. People started reporting traffickers, adopting measures to protect the savannah. Simba, the lion who swam the ocean, showed that survival is more than instinct, it's hope. Small actions like sharing stories like Simba's or supporting wildlife NGOs can create waves of change. Start today in your own way. Close your eyes for a second. Imagine Simba roaring again, the sun shining on his fur. Can you feel the power of that victory? But what does this story teach us about what really matters in life? And so, what lingers after a story like Simba's? A lion swimming in the ocean, 200 kilometers off the Tanzanian coast, defying everything we think is possible. The cry for help heard by Jamal, a simple fisherman who didn't hesitate. The compassion that united the Coast Guard, veterinarian Amara, and an entire team to save a savannah king. Every wave faced, every defibrillator shock, every faint roar from Simba. It all reminds us that life, human or animal, is a fragile thread, but strong enough to change the world. Simba isn't just a lion, he's a mirror. He shows what happens when we act from the heart, like Jamal grabbing the radio, or when we persist, like Amara, who wouldn't let Simba give up. His scars, marks of animal trafficking, scream to us, empathy can heal. And you, what did you feel hearing this story? Who hasn't had an animal that seemed to understand every piece of their heart? Simba teaches us that survival is more than instinct. It's unity, it's hope, it's believing one act can create ripples. Now we want to hear from you. Have you had an animal that changed your life? Or a story of compassion that marked your path? Share it in the comments, because every story is a spark to inspire others. And if this warmed your heart, the next video YouTube suggests will move you even more. Don't miss it. Give a like, subscribe, and let's keep spreading stories that show the best of us. Because deep down, as Simba showed us, we can all be a little bit kings.